was waiting for a bus a few days before Labor Day, and I live in a neighborhood that's a half street in a sea of have-nots, and it's a half couple.
He's in Brooks Brothers, and he's got the fresh minted Wall Street Journal under his arm, and she's a looker. She's got Bloomingdale, Neiman Marcus clothes, latest issue Vanity Fair.
And I can't make any conversation with him for a whole year. I see him every day waiting for the bus. And so I talk to myself out loud. And by the way, I find that audience very appreciative.
So I say, Labor Day's coming up. That is the worst thing I could possibly have said. He looks at me. He gave me that look that no old coward would give to a speck of dirt on a cup. Like that. And he turns away.
And I what's a challenge? The bus is late in coming. I say, Labor Day's the day we march down Michigan Boulevard, Chicago's main thoroughfare. Banners held high, steel workers, union auto workers, farm equipment workers, packing house.
Which side are you on? Solidarity forever. He turns to me and he says, we despise unions. And I say, oh, I got a pigeon here.
Now I become the ancient mariner, fixing him with a glittering eye. And I say, how many hours a day do you work? It's something of a non sequitur, so he's caught unaware. So he says, 8. This time I got him pinned against the mailbox.
Why don't you work 16 hours a day? 16, yeah, because your great-grandparents worked 16 hours a day.
And I say, you know why you work 8, not 18? Because 4 guys got hanged 100 years ago. It's the Haymarket affair in Chicago.
They were campaigning, old German anarchists and others, campaigned for the 8-hour day. And there was a big gathering, and someone threw a bomb, no one knows who, a couple of cops were killed and people. And the people who were speaking there, and long ago gone, were convicted of conspiracy, and of the 8 people convicted, 4 were hanged. And you know what they were fighting for? The 8-hour day. So these 4 guys were hanged for you.
By this time, the couple is somewhat trembling, and the bus comes, and I never saw them again. To this day, I know she's up on the 35th floor of the high-scale high-rise. They look down, he says, is the old nut still down there?
Anarchists were very influential and strong in the United States in the late 19th century, especially in Chicago. It seemed to be a sort of center for anarchist thought. And it's not surprising that anarchists were powerful, because those years were years of terrible conditions for American labor. And anarchists played an important role in sort of organizing people and leading them. And what happened at Haymarket in 1886 is that there was a meeting, an anarchist meeting protesting police murder of strikers, and a bomb exploded among the police, and 7 policemen were killed. And to this day, nobody knows who threw the bomb, but they simply rounded up anarchist leaders. You know, it was convenient. They still do that. They round up people who they don't know they committed the crime, but they just suspect them, or they say, well, as they did then, they say whoever committed the crime was probably influenced by the anarchists. So they sentenced 8 anarchists to death. 4 of them ultimately were executed. That was the Haymarket affair.
Hi, and welcome to Ward 13, yet another show, Meet the Candidates. I indeed am a candidate, John Hopwood, for Hillsborough County Commissioner. But I have 2 other candidates with me. We have Mark MacKenzie, the former president of the New Hampshire AFL-CIO, and a resident of Ward 10, which seems to create the titans in New Hampshire politics.
There you go.
And well, we have a picture of Station 2, Fire Station 2, that we'll bring up later. And I have Jim O'Connell with me here on my right, which, you know, I guess which one of us is more over the left. But and later, in the second half hour, I'm going to ask Willis Griffith to sit on me, to change the demographics a bit. Good. And Mark, tell us a bit about yourself. I would say, in my estimation, you must be the most outstanding person in the New Hampshire labor movement of the last generation.
Well, that's.
Thank
you.
I'm a journalist.
So where I come from, I grew up as a kid in Everett, Massachusetts, and I always wanted to be a firefighter. That from the time I was a young kid. Of course, a lot of young kids want to be firefighters, but I really wanted to be one. So,
okay, this is a good time. Brendan, bring up station number 2. That was I thought you were going to call in.
There you go.
There we go. Station number 2. That's where you were for 17 years.
That's right. I was a lieutenant there, captain there, and yeah.
People used to vote there. I used to go with my mother to vote, and you'd have the machines, and she'd let me pull the handle. Yeah. Gary Hamer, too, he'd be there with his mother.
Yeah, before my time over there, but yeah. A lot of fire stations had second floors, and they were basically community locations. Engine 7 was that way, 3s was that way, and yeah, so that was a lot of those. But so anyways, I wanted to be a firefighter, and so I tried in Massachusetts. It was a tough time in Massachusetts, 1974, to get on. I knew a couple of people up in New Hampshire. I called them up. I applied for the fire department, and it's September. Right now, actually, it's September 46 years ago. I get on the fire department and spent 27 years as a city firefighter, best fire department in the country, by hands down, I said, and it was a terrific job. And so where I launched my labor movement really was in 1978. The firefighters went on strike in Manchester.
That's right. Yeah.
So we went on strike. We were on strike about 10 days. It was an illegal strike because in 1975 they actually passed legislation, the collective bargaining law outlawed strikes in the state of New Hampshire. So here we go. And really what the fight was that firefighters were working 48-hour shifts, and they currently work 42s. Now, 6 hours doesn't sound like a whole lot until you start laying out a schedule for 6 hours.
Yeah.
That difference. So, it was a sea change in terms of the way the firefighters worked. It was a tough strike. We settled the strike on midnight of the midnight. The following morning, we had all been served. We were to report to the National Guard Armory at 8 o'clock in the morning, and to be basically jailed. And we had all made plans to march down Elm Street in our uniforms, and the national press had all come in for it, and we were able to settle it, at the last minute. So that whole thing kind of launched my career in the labor movement, and I went, I was the secretary-treasurer local at the time. I went on to become the secretary-treasurer of professional firefighters, served as a legislative agent for them, and also the AFL-CIO. I was the executive vice president for a period of time. And then 1989-90, I was elected as the president of the AFL-CIO, which was, at the time, was 38,000 people from all unions. In fact, those are the days when the shoe mills were still going, and textile mills, and the paper mills were still going. And I spent 25 years, to the best of my knowledge, I was the longest serving AFL-CIO president in the United States. I got done with that and went on to the legislature, was elected from Ward 10.
District 17.
Yeah, that's right. And so I was elected there, and I spent a couple of years in the House, had a great time doing it, and ran for Congress, gave that up to run for Congress, and did that, and didn't make it. And here we are. I thought I was done with politics for a little while, and this happened to come up, and it's an opportunity for an executive council. A lot of people don't know what they do, and we'll talk about that a little bit later on. But
I just want to say, running against the Papist, which I'm running against a Papist, is quite formidable. As I was saying to Jim before, they say the only two people people are saying it's going to be a Democratic wave, but my anxiety says maybe we have to work hard, maybe not such a wave. I think it was Mark Hayward told me, he says, oh, well, the only two Republicans that get elected are Sununu and Tony Pappas, so, my heart goes out to you. That's a formidable name. Can I just ask you,
Sure.
You mentioned about the community of being a firefighter,
right.
And I remember what being a firefighter was when I was a kid. Everybody, remember the old ladder trucks? Everybody. I still remember my ladder truck, all metal that my father, we left out and ran over in his new Bonneville to much consternation. it was a very dangerous job then. It's a dangerous job now, but it was extremely dangerous. But can you mention about the sense of community again, what a fire station meant, and how that informed, your commitment to...
Sure. I mean, well, that's an interesting question because, over the course of the last couple of years, you run for Congress and you run for this job, and you give a lot of speeches for people, and you begin to learn a lot about yourself. And the fire department clearly had a big impact on how how I look at the world, I think. And it was an opportunity to really contribute to the community, to be in a position of people respected you, what you did, but you also had an obligation to make sure that everybody you were in contact with, that you treated them, with respect and dignity and equally. And, in public service, because a lot of people, the fire department, police, fire, the people that pick up the trash and things, that's the face of government for a lot of people. I mean, they don't go to meetings, but this is their government. And so I was always mindful of that, and all the work that I did over the years in the labor movement was really driven by that core value that that everybody should be treated with respect and dignity, and be treated the same, regardless of where you find people, where they come from, what their situation might be. As a public employee, you have that obligation. You have an obligation to do that.
As a writer, the metaphor of fires, which when I was a kid, there were fires. Remember when Morrows burned down? I can still remember. And people would go out to them, I don't want to say it's entertainment, but it's just naturally. And the anxiety that people like my mother, who was born in 1926, had over all these old furnaces, and everything was going to burn down because they had seen stuff like that.
Right.
We live in a different world with different building codes, and firefighters, the inhalation in the, I think they first made some type of mask back in 1913, but it wasn't effective maybe to the 70s. So, but the thing about going to put out fires is a great metaphor for, I think of Democrat, because there's so many fires that have been set by certain Republicans. But I'm going to, Jim was in the labor movement, and you were a famous union. I'm going to pass the baton to you.
Nothing like Mr. MacKenzie here at all, nothing so suspicious. But as a young man, I was involved in the labor movement, and I was a shop steward with what is today London Transport,
right.
Driving the red buses in London, and that was the old Transport and General Workers Union, which is now Unity, and
which is tremendously powerful.
I learned my chops over there, and but anyway, So, and I'm very proud of the fact that when I ran for the first time, and as many people who know me know, I waited until I was 60 to decide to run for office, so it's not been an ambition of mine previously, but I find myself now honoured by the fact that the people of Manchester chose me in the last election, and I've now been, this is 8 months, I've been on the Manchester Board of School Committee. Little did I think when I ran, or when I took up my seat first, little did I think we'd be facing the issues that we're facing as our school districts are. And I had spent a lot of time working on community issues in Manchester. So 4 kids, and so, starting off as any dad or mom does, working in Little League and soccer and all the other, acting and dance and all the things that one spends a couple of decades of one's life is sort of lost in doing all of that. But education has always been important to me. So, so I ran for the office of school board member at large. And
came in number 1.
I did, and again, as I said, I'm honored by that.
Is that because of the deep roots you had in the community and with other people, educators?
Yeah.
And
I'd sort of leave it to others to judge almost, right? Because I don't, but I think that working in one's community and demonstrating a commitment which isn't based on a quid pro quo of I'll do this, but you need to vote for me next month. I think it's a healthier thing, and so when people give of themselves to be in community organisations and be out on snowy nights at fundraisers and stuff, it's clearly somebody wants to help their community, and so I think, and and I was lucky in a lot of the boards that I was on, and I was president of Manchester North Soccer League for a few years, and I was president of the PTO at Hillside for Hillside Middle School for about 6 years, and other things. I was president of Citizens for Manchester Schools, and I could go on. But the point I would like to make about those is that I was very lucky, and I mean this. This is not false. This is not false.
Humility?
False humility. I was very lucky that on those boards there were some amazing people who made me look good all the time. We undertook tasks, and there were people around me who drove them to closure, and that of course made me very good.
But Jim, you were a fighter. You didn't like Mark was too, when the firemen's union.
Yeah.
You did not just stand pat with the status quo.
No.
And you took on Ted Gatzis.
I did, and we had a lot of
which
fun.
I think Mark is going to be taking on.
Yes.
By the way, I support Mark MacKenzie.
Yeah. So I there's a pugilist in me for sure. But I want to just switch just for 1 second, because I thought of something as you were talking about the fire department and your history in the fire department, and I'm now running for maintaining my seat as the school board member at large in Manchester, but I'm running, and there is a primary on September 8th, as we all know. I'm running for Register of Deeds in Hillsborough County, and so. I'm aware of all those towns in Hillsborough County, but one of them is in front of my mind now as we talk about the fire department, because the town of Goffstown lost a firefighter, Captain Stephen Tower, a couple of days ago at 54 years old, gone before his time. So I just that's a shock to the community in Goffstown and to everybody, and so I think it's important we sort of recognize that. And the other thing about the funny thing about fires, I've lived in 6 different countries around the world, and regardless of where you go, there's nuances.
Yes.
But fire departments and firefighters and the firefighting community and their links with the community and the brotherhood of fire, the IBEW, the International Brother of Electrical Workers, has got the international in their name, right? Yeah. But truly, you could put the word international in the Brotherhood of Firefighters.
Oh, it is actually,
because it is, and you feel it, and you know it. And
can I just say something? When I lived in California for almost as long as you were at Station 2, and firefighters in California. I mean, somebody was talking on Facebook about, there's these terrible fires. I'm thinking. Yes, and there's fires all the time, but firefighters are like, they're so essential to.
Well, growing up in Ireland, John, it seemed to me that everybody had an uncle who was a firefighter in New York or Boston.
That's right, an
or San Francisco too. Like everybody, had an uncle or a first cousin and people used to talk about it as though it was down the street. Like my uncle Johnny is in Charlestown, and well, my uncle was at Engine 14, and I'm like, what are they talking about? But anyway, so it's a wonderful thing. But again, thank you, John, for this opportunity to be here today. I'm running for Register of Deeds. A lesser known position, nonetheless though important for people, anybody transacting property and etc. in Hillsborough County, and I'm asking for their vote, and I'll work as hard at that job as I have at the others. And
this is not something you are very familiar with deeds from.
Right.
Not everybody knows.
Not everybody knows that.
Your
but
background.
But thank you so for leading me to it.
I actually know what you.
I have worked in both commercial and residential real estate, mostly in commercial real estate actually, but I have licenses which. I don't think they're active right now. For people who are familiar, I have a license that I don't use it all the time, so I sometimes go a couple of years and then I bang them a couple of $100 to renew it, and it goes on. But I have licenses in both Massachusetts and New Hampshire, and so I've worked on real estate projects from the very large to the very small. So I bring that level of understanding of the business. So again, I ask for people's support, and the main thing I'll offer them is straightforwardness and honesty and
efficiency
and hard work. Well, that's one of the things that I the efficiency of the within the organization. It's important that these are costs to people during real estate transactions.
Oh yeah.
And so we should be minimizing those costs. And the way I come about it isn't to minimize costs by stripping the asset, but rather than introducing efficiency. So we give the public, better services, and if we get there cheaper, we get there cheaper because we introduce efficiencies, not because we stripped away half the service.
And people don't understand how important that is, because there's actually been litigation all over the country when the Register of Deeds has a failure.
Right.
Because it impacts everyone's life. It's a big
and
business.
ultimately it adds cost to real estate transactions, which makes housing and business more expensive for everybody. So I'm looking forward to it and looking forward to the challenge. We have a primary on the 8th, and if all goes well, if I'm successful there, we'll roll into November. And we'll see where we go from there.
Jim, from your focus on education, you know how vital the state is.
Yes.
Now we're going to bring Mark back into it about executive council, because many people don't know what the executive council is. And why don't you explain to the audience about what is the executive council and why is it important?
Sure. Well, the executive council, when you look at it, it is a very unique form of executive management within the state, and probably even by their own admission, the website will say that they are probably one of the finest examples of how you manage government.
Checks and balances.
Well, checks and balances, and it is rooted really in our forefathers who did not want another king.
That's right.
They wanted a government which basically made sure that nobody at the top had a whole lot of authority, and they divided that authority among five councils. They're representing from 5 districts throughout the state of New Hampshire. And in spite of what the governors say at times is, thinking they have all this authority, in reality, they really the way that this is set up is that they really have to work hand in hand with the executive council to do things. Now, the council has really a heavy lift in the sense that every contract over $10,000 comes before the council. And so the council will get, piles of documents for each thing. And I've got some suggestions about how we might be able to, knock that down. But they do. So they're responsible for going through all these contracts. And then the other thing they're responsible for, all the boards and commissions in the state, the governor appoints, and for the most part, there are some situations where that doesn't happen, but for the most part, the governor appoints, and the council have to approve. So you always need 3 votes. It's always that. And then the big ones, the Supreme Court.
Yes, which we can get to a little later.
Yeah, so the Supreme Court's coming up. The Department of Education's coming up early in March. The chair of that, and there was. There's been some controversy around both of those positions. So they're responsible for a lot of those kinds of things, and they get paid much better than the legislature. They get paid $16,000 a year.
Oh, I thought it was 17.
Well, it might be close to 17, but they also get expenses as well. Okay. Now, the reason I raise that is because they only meet twice a month, I think.
Yes, every 2
weeks.
Every
2 weeks. And, when you look at the legislature, which I was in, we met a whole lot more than every 2 weeks. And they met for $100, over the course of the year. So I think, there's a little room there to meet more often, to cut the workload, down so that you have more time to be thoughtful and deliberate in terms of some of the things that you're gonna face. And these are big issues. This body shapes the government.
Right.
In a lot of ways.
And you do read those contracts. One venerable warrior, veteran of the State House, I won't mention the person's name, mentioning Sununu and Gatsis, said that having them both on the, because I guess this governor is part of the executive council in a way, but he was incredulous because he said neither one of them reads, which I imagine not that they're illiterate, but they just don't read the contracts or the details. They don't read the briefing papers. He was of the opinion that Governor Sununu was a lightweight compared to his father or the brother who he had known. So you have you negotiated contracts. I'm sure there's nothing you haven't seen.
No, well, but I also, I've got a master's in public administration and, undergrad degrees, and have spent a lot of time in the legislature over the course of my career. In my advocacy, I've been in the legislature, read legislation, wrote legislation, passed it. So I have a sense of how how things work within the legislature. I think I bring that to the executive council because I really think the government has to work together. Everybody has a role, the executive department, judicial, and the legislative, but you got to work together. And there's some really good examples lately with the distribution of money around the COVID money. That doesn't show that at all. There is a sense that the governor has that he can basically just spend millions of dollars that came into the state from the federal government without any...
Yeah, under some type of emergency powers. It just doesn't seem like it's constitutional. But
well,
I'm
that challenge is ongoing.
Right.
I mean, there is currently a challenge. And maybe you'll see the executive council at some point because it was a question about standing. But
right.
I do. From what I can read, what I know, and what I listen to, I think he's overstepping.
Yeah, Jim, we'll come to you in just a second. But I'm just thinking that this pandemic's going to go on. We're expecting another wave, and then we have the flu. So how much longer can you just power invested in one person, the governor, that was never meant under our Constitution? Jim?
Thank you, John. I don't know. When I think about the topics that covered in the last 5 minutes, it's mind blowing. The idea that a Republican governor in the state of New Hampshire would have $1.25 billion, and that alone is amazing in terms of finances in the state of New Hampshire. That's a huge amount of money.
That's real money.
$1.25 billion in California is real money. In New Hampshire, it's an amazing amount of money. Yeah. And given our deficiencies, and I'll start with education, where we are in education, we're the least well-funded school system in the United States of America.
That's right.
And
our university almost lost accreditation a few years ago. It lost accreditation the year that you became a firefighter.
The most expensive public education and university in the United States is in New Hampshire, and not unconnected to that is the fact that young people and families in the state of New Hampshire have the highest level of college debt in the United States, and given that we're the fifth or sixth richest state in the United States in per capita terms, that's shocking. But my issue with Governor Sununu around education is that, first of all, that he appointed somebody like Mr. Edelbrud as the Commissioner for Education, who in the middle of this pandemic, last Wednesday night, I think it was Wednesday night, but it was last week, in a much ballyhooed and well advertised public meeting, he was addressing the issue of homeschooling and helping people with homeschooling and what they might do. Now, when you think about the way the state responded to the COVID crisis for schools, they put together a so-called task force in Concord to advise, and the group was pulled together, and they met 3 times. And at the end of it, there was no connect between them and the body of work that came out, because the report that came out and the policy, which was a non-policy, was actually created by a consultancy group with connections to Betsy DeVos. So we went through this pretense of having input from the towns, cities, and various groups within the state of New Hampshire. And yet we have a direct link to Betsy DeVos. We reach out for this federally, connected organization to come in and hand us a solution. And my complaint about Governor Sununu is this is the sort of Teflon nature of nothing sticking to him. This is the work. Other governors are less careful, maybe, or less good at being able to hide this sort of sleight of hand. Things like coming into Manchester 7 or 8 months ago to hand out a check at Bakersfield School.
Oh yeah, it was
in
shameful.
A cynical exercise, without telling the mayor that he was coming, and just drove around the state to be photographed in front of checks and drive on. So I like you. I'm hoping that the Executive Council has some teeth, and I would say to my many conservative Republican friends, they should be alarmed and should be asking questions about the way in which government and taxpayers' money is being managed and distributed across the United States, but in New Hampshire too. And if they think that Governor Sununu is not part of the snout in the trough crowd, then I think they're very wrong, and they should be looking at that.
I just
Well
like,
said.
yeah.
I mean, very well said.
Thank you.
I'd just like to ask one question, then we're going to have a little short. Studs is going to come back for 1 minute, and then I'm going to bring young Willis Griffith in to join in. I just like about the executive council. I'm shocked. My father wanted me to be a lawyer. Even on his deathbed, he told me to become a lawyer. But I was like Biff and and he's Willie Loman in Death of a Salesman. I'm going to spite him. So I didn't go to law school. But I was a legal editor, and had all this edited books and everything. I was shocked by the fact that Governor Sununu, not just so much that he nominated for Chief Justice of the New Hampshire Supreme Court, somebody that was unqualified, the current Attorney General, because he wasn't. He had no judicial experience whatsoever. That doesn't become Chief Justice. Somebody like that, maybe in Alabama, but or something. Mm-hmm. But then, after he was rejected by the 3 Democrats on the Executive Council, he refused to make another nomination. Now, I remember when I got here in 2010, I came back to Ward 10, with a mother that I, went to vote with her at Station 2. She had late Alzheimer's. And I tell you, I just can't believe that Sununu hasn't nominated anybody. I mean, he's refused to nominate people. But when I got here in 2010, we had the Tea Party General Court, Bill O'Brien, and they led an attack on the judiciary. CRA, I think it was 624, that wanted to strip the power of the Chief Justice over the justice, over the justice system, which incidentally only came constitutionally in 1966. It was a battle to get it back. They were hostile to the judiciary, and I see this as part of that tradition of him pandering to the Tea Party. What would you call them?
If I could say, John, I just back to Mark. This is why people, dispassionate, independent voters, people who just sort of want to do the right thing and aren't, should be very aware of the need for checks and balances.
Yes.
And we have this unique opportunity in the state of New Hampshire where we have an executive council where you can sort of have it both ways if you want. Because
a Republican and a Democrat.
You can vote for people into the executive council who if they have the bravery and the interest in doing it, can hold the governor to account, as he should be. That doesn't mean to limit him in what he can do, in the sense of trying to stop him from what is rightfully the thing to be done, but to act as a conscience, as a brake, as an oversight. And so I commend you for running, and it's an important position. We have thank you. We have the issue of I'll finish with this guy. I'll step out, John, and let Chris in. But
no, that's fine. We'll bring Willie. I
okay,
want you both.
Sorry.
I'm running for county commissioner against the Papists, so
So
because I don't have a primary. But Mark, can you just say a few words about that, because I find it outrageous that over a year we don't have a Chief Justice Supreme Court. We only have 4 votes in the court. It's to hamstring the court.
Well, I mean, I think it speaks to, to maturity.
Yes.
To somebody who understands their responsibility, in the public sector. I've always said, in all the work that I've done over the years, is that public employees, and the governor's a public employee, elected official, but they have this inherent responsibility to the people that they serve.
Yes.
And they have to make, and I understand politics enters into it and all that kind of stuff, but at the end of the day, you got to be able to justify what you've done. And you got to be able to say, go home and, look yourself in the mirror and say, look, I did the best I could do for the people of the state of New Hampshire today. And whether leaving a vacant position in that, or putting in somebody who undermines public education or other things, is that the best for the state of New Hampshire? And I think that's a test for anybody that's in public service or elected officials. You've got to be able to do that, look yourself in the mirror. And I think that they're, I think there's another example which is really pretty stunning, is that the way that he has basically stuck his finger in the eye of the legislature. You know, they said, look, we're responsible for the appropriation of this money. There's millions of dollars in play right here. And he basically said, you know, no, you're not. I'm in charge. Well, you know, that's going to come down on top of him sooner or later.
That's not
It
tomorrow.
has to.
57 vetoes, was it, or 55 vetoes?
Oh, yeah, his veto was there. You know, he vetoed the family medical leave after he had made a commitment that he was going to do it.
Well,
in a time when the pandemic is like raging,
Yeah,
when people need that kind of coverage.
This is the perfect time to bring Willis Griffith, because he is a state rep. Brendan, can you run the 1 minute video and put the flag back up?
It's easy to blame this young couple, but now you think about it, what do they know about labor? You pick up, let alone Wall Street Journal, pick up the New York Times, the Washington Post, LA Times, the prestigious. You have a feature section. They've got a sports section, of course. They've got style, fashion, theater, gossip. They've got a business section all about LBOs and about downsizing, which, of course, is a euphemism for mass firings. We know that. But is there a labor section? Because this is a joke, labor section. Is there a labor page? Is there a labor column? Once in a while you have a bit about Pickett may have thrown a rock at a scab, but it's a story. Or today, the humiliation of the United Auto Workers in Decatur, Illinois, going back to Caterpillar. But there is no coverage, so how would they know about that?
Is this making sense to you?
Welcome back, folks. And John has stepped away for a minute, and we've been joined by Will Griffith. Welcome, Wills. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here.
We were in the middle, as you were sitting here in the audience. We were talking about the Governor Sununu, and in particular the way that, as Mark had said, the sort of disrespect and the ignoring of the legislature, and the number of vetoes that he's had. And let me throw that to you. I mean, as a current a member, and if you want to introduce yourself at the same time, because you're running again. So
Absolutely.
Off you go.
Happy to speak to the vetoes first, because it is so relevant. It is so important. We did see paid family leave vetoed again, as you were just talking about, and it's really unfortunate that the messaging and the theme from the governor's office has been that it's an income tax. For so many families, this is a crucial piece that allows either the mother, the father to go to work while or following having a child, taking care of a sick one, really having that time to take care of your family. In a situation like the pandemic that we're facing, we know that the challenges aren't new. They're just exacerbating what already exists. And that's what's most disappointing, is vetoing this and calling it an income tax at a time when people need it the most.
Right.
And we can support people, and it can come. He committed to it, and we have seen no follow through. And so it's really disappointing to see it. The legislator, along with a number of other important vetoes, were so close on energy efficiency and net metering, and taking big steps on renewable energy. And unfortunately, that's come up just a couple votes shy a number of times. I think fortunately, the big win that we had last year was the death penalty override. And that was a huge victory for the state that really brought us forward.
And Rennie Cushing worked as hard as anybody could over the years. It's quite a story Rennie has.
Rennie's a New Hampshire legend. And
he is.
happy to serve with him.
Great guy. Good friend of mine.
One of the things, and I'm sorry I'm a little education-centric, because that's sort of what I spend my time on, but, we have this commission that was set up at the state level, the Education Funding Commission, whose task is to look at the state of funding for education in the state of New Hampshire, and to bring forth solutions. And this is something that's going to end up, it's a difficult time to do it because of the COVID crisis, but this is something that will end up coming before the legislature and eventually perhaps the Executive Council. And there is no easy answer, right? So I'm hoping that the people who run and the people who are successful will be brave enough to take my worry is that we're going to get something piecemeal, that's something that's really no change at all. At best, move around a couple of things and we're really back to where we are. So if any of you want to take that up.
Absolutely. I'd love to go backwards too and do a little introduction that I think might give
please,
some light as
please,
well
yeah.
to the education piece. I am the current state rep for Ward 11 on the west side. It's been an absolute pleasure to serve. I am a New Hampshire native and grew up here, originally from Amherst, but our whole family are Manchester transplants now on the west side. My mom's just over the line in Goffstown, but the mailing address still says Manchester,
There you
so we'll count it. One of your Ward 10
Yeah.
former constituents.
Yeah.
And during my first term at the State House, I really ran on housing, public education, paid family leave, a lot of these issues that either were vetoed or we were able to make some progress on in the first term. And I know we've kind of dinged Governor Sununu, rightfully so, for a lot of this. He did invite me and a couple other young Democratic leaders in to work with him across the aisle on affordable housing, and it turned into a pretty large omnibus housing package that we were able to pass the House, and unfortunately lose due to the pandemic, lost a lot of legislation. But within that first term, I do serve on the Ways and Means Committee, so we see the education funding will come to us. We saw the capital gains tax that would have offered a different revenue source, same as cannabis legalization. So there are a number of things that will come through the Ways and Means Committee. And as the chairman of the Young Democrats Caucus, which is 32 members strong, so
That's
you got
great.
32 members under the age of 40, just terrific, and
Right.
that's been phenomenal. And we're really advocating around this, and we know that it's needed in Manchester. And with the first round of formulas that came out of that commission, I'm excited to work on that when we're back in session.
Right, right, and they're still accepting input, from the public, so people should be interested and pay attention. Mark, if I could say to you, I remember, you talked briefly earlier on about the role of the Executive Council, and for those who aren't used to New Hampshire politics, because it's pretty unique to the state of New Hampshire. They sometimes think wrongly discounted, and I can remember I'm a big advocate for rail. And so I remember a vote, a really critical vote that happened at the Executive Council one very humdrum average weekday, and a vote was taken, and it was during the development of I-93, and it was to add for a very small amount of money. I don't know what it was, but it was the environmental impact study for putting a rail down the centre of the new I-93.
Yeah.
So when all the construction was going on over the last 10 years, so the first step was the environmental study. And the Executive Council voted 3-2 against it. And at that moment in time, the possibility of new rail between Manchester and New Hampshire disappeared. And whatever else was going to happen, we might end up on the Nashua side, changing the bridge over time and going down. But the idea of going down through 93, which was the cheapest and best option, the best value for the taxpayers of the state of New Hampshire, was eliminated not by the legislature, not by the governor. It happened on a rainy day when nobody was watching, a minor vote that killed. Because if the environmental impact couldn't go ahead, the project was moving on. This hadn't been included. It was like it should have been highlighted as a veto of rail. So, I'm a big advocate of people paying attention to the Executive Council.
Well, I agree with that, and I think one of the things I've always tried to do as a member of the labor movement, and as an advocate for work, is just to try to take stuff and kind of break it down so people understand it. And the labor laws would confuse people sometimes, but I think your responsibility as an elected official is to be able to do that, to be able to take what is complicated legislation, complicated policy matters, and be able to break it down so people really get it. And so when you have a meeting and people listening or people watching, you got to really, my sense is you got to take hold of it, break it down. And so when the vote comes, people know exactly what just happened, as opposed to, stuffing it under and all that. So I think, but the other thing I'd say about that is, again, that's the question of the public good, right? I mean, everybody knows that, I wonder what that was. So, okay. Everybody knows that we need rail in New Hampshire. For somebody who represented workers for years, so many people in the state are just stuck in locations that they can't get out of. They can't move. They can't afford to go from here to there. In New Hampshire, you got to take a bus. Bus costs a lot of money. You pay $26, $28 to go back and forth to Boston. If you live in Berlin, New Hampshire, or you live in North Conway, or your chances of getting to places where you have an opportunity to make better wages is really tough. So people try to piece their lives together. And so often that's happening, I think, in the state of New Hampshire. And it doesn't have to happen. I think one of the things that they just did in New York City was to look at using public funds, to invest public funds in apprenticeship training and good wages and health care to rebuild the city of New York, the infrastructure of the city of New York. Now, we advocated, I don't know how many times, to do the same thing on Route 93, which will be the big dig. Nobody wants to say that, but it is the big dig of New Hampshire, which is going to cost in excess of $800 million to build 17 miles of road, which is outrageous. But what have we got out of that in terms of workforce development? Who the people got the decent jobs? Who come out of this with apprenticeship training? Who has health insurance? Who has been able to buy homes because they've got decent jobs? There's a whole thing around that. And when you talk to people about that, they say, well, that's not how it works. Well, for 2 years in New Hampshire, I wrote and passed the best value contracting legislation in New Hampshire, which allowed the state to be able to do exactly that, to take into consideration apprenticeship training and good wages and health care, and put together demonstration projects. We had 6 demonstration projects. The Republicans come in, the next thing, gone. They knocked it the heck out of the thing. That you got to use public money. Invest in your state, invest in the workers, invest in the infrastructure of the state. And that's, to me, that's how you grow the economy. And you do it, you're going to spend the money anyway. Right. Spend it in a way that it helps people in the state. So
well, let me ask you, so the priorities going back, when are you back? When will the next session be, and what will your priorities be?
Absolutely. Well, we'll be back on September 16th, I believe, for the veto override day, and there's not a whole lot of hope in that day, I think. We're really hoping to squeeze out maybe net metering, which was a big one and very close again. Unfortunately, one of the other ones was medical monitoring, which fell just short as well. That's another Rennie Cushing-led effort, and he is such a tremendous advocate for us. The session itself will be back. The window for bills opens the day after the primary for those that are already elected. And so in that window and following, should I be reelected after September 8th and then after November 3rd as well, those priorities look a lot like they did before. And as I mentioned right at the beginning, we know that they're not necessarily new issues. It's a lot of issues that are exacerbated. So it's revisiting affordable housing and not just directing COVID funding that way, but really creating long-term sustainable change that increases to a healthy amount our vacancy rate, so we can bring prices down and we can get folks into apartments and homes and either bigger or smaller places, and we should have housing choice for folks to be able to move around, and that's a big issue. One of the other bills I introduced, and it was great to hear you talk about student debt before, was my student loans ombudsman bill and education program, adding an ombudsman within the banking commissioner's office to really help protect borrowers and provide information and hold those private lenders accountable. And so there's a number of things that we can do at the state level to help borrowers, workers, tenants that are only exacerbated during this time. And we have another opportunity next session.
Well, that segues for me nicely into the subject we talked earlier about, the governor, and the way in which he's managed these funds that have been these huge amounts of money, 1.25 billion plus and counting. And part of that, there was some people advocated, pointed out that the COVID crisis affected minority communities and poor communities at a much higher rate than it did the general population. And part of that was the way in which public schools would be funded. And Governor Sununu's response to that was to say, yes, I hear you, and the following day to take money and to put that money into the glorified voucher program into private schools. And it struck me, when I look at, you talk about the public good and the way in which we manage our scarce resources. it seems to me, it's appalling to me that somebody working in Manchester at some manufacturing job on third shift is paying their taxpayer dollars into a system that then takes it and puts those dollars into the richest private schools in the state of New Hampshire. It makes no sense at all, and I've made the point that we have a wonderful school, we have lots of wonderful schools, we have a wonderful private school in Manchester called Derryfield, and it's $30,000 a year to go there, and I've said, I have friends who go there, it's a wonderful institution, it's a net good for Manchester, we want it, we're proud of it, they're partners of ours in the city and some education programs, etc. So, but we shouldn't be afraid to call out also the fact that it makes no sense to give the same amount of money per student to the families who can afford $30,000 a year to send their sixth grader to a school, and give the same amount of money to a kid from Bakersfield School or Beat Street or Wilson Street School, schools with 93, 95, 96% poverty rates. Yeah. That was a decision made by Betsy DeVos and enabled by Mr. Edelblut, who was an appointee of Governor Sununu, and he shouldn't be able to run from it. These are immoral acts, in my view. Do we have someone joining us?
We do. I think we have Alderman Bill Barry on the line with us here today.
Hey, Bill.
How are you? Hey, Jim. What's up, my man?
How are you? Good to see you. Good to hear you. I mean.
I'm doing awesome.
All right. So we're
just plugging away, doing a lot of city work. Very, very busy, and which is a good thing. It's not a bad thing.
Right.
So we'll continue that effort, and we'll go from there.
All right. You had a good meeting last night, I think.
I think so. I think it went well. We had a few discussions, which is good. It's always good, and I think the city's in good shape. We're going to deal with the homeless situation. It's actually the mayor suggested that we go. We we already have a committee. We don't have to form a different committee, but we're going to use the public safety and health traffic committee, which I'm actually the chairman of, and Pat Long is also on the committee. So we're going to be dealing with the homeless situation and come up with some type of try to come up with some solutions. And it's not going to be one solution. There's going to be several, because we have to figure out a way that we can work with the homeless and get them the assistance and help that they need. And it's not just finding a home, because a lot of them just can't deal with being in a home. They'd much rather be outside. That's their choice. And but we have to deal with them, to make sure that they're safe and that they're protected out in the environment.
Bill, if I could just say to you one other thing, that we heard yesterday, and that was the resignation of Chief Capano as police chief in Manchester. And I was reminded at the meeting last night when people spoke that he has been in Manchester through not just this latest COVID crisis, but the opiate pandemic, or the opiate issue, and of course the homeless issue, etc. And he's dealt with these things, has developed a rapport with all the different groups within the city, and he'll be a difficult man to replace. What were your thoughts on his departure and on who might replace him?
Well, obviously, I'm sad to hear that he's retiring, but I'm also happy for him.
Yes.
Spending 24 and a half years in law enforcement is an unbelievable task, and I'll tell you, it gets tougher and tougher every single year, and it's very difficult to get people that want to get into that field, and it's even more difficult to keep them.
Right.
Unfortunately, the way the culture is these days, there are a lot of people that get into law enforcement, and there's in the way that they're treated by some people in the public is terrible. On the other hand, police, when they put that badge on, they put it on, and they have to show respect to the community, whether even when you're in the process of arresting someone, after the arrest is complete, it's your responsibility to have respect for the person that you're actually arresting.
Right.
I've been fortunate. I've had 34 years in law enforcement, and I've never mistreated anyone. I've actually had people come up to me and I'm sure a lot of police and someone in law enforcement can say the same. I've actually had people come up to me years after and thank me, not only because they straightened out their lives, but because when I did arrest them, I treated them with respect, and they appreciated that.
So,
and
Bill,
it went a long way because
right.
it changed. Some of them, absolutely changed their life around.
Right. So Bill, thank you for that. And if you ever have the opportunity to arrest me, want you to be very gentle. But Bill, we have to go because we're down to the last couple of minutes. But if you'd like to say you're running for sheriff in Hillsborough County, and so if you just want to mention that very briefly because we're almost out of time.
Okay, yeah, no, I am. Obviously, I'm running for sheriff, and it's certainly an uphill battle because in Hillsborough County it's been difficult for a Democrat to win. I'm proud to be a Democrat. That doesn't mean that I'm against or different than any Republican. I am who I am, and I've done what I've done, and I would have done. My involvement in the community speaks for itself. My years of service also speak for itself.
All right, Bill.
So I'm in it for the right reasons. I'm doing it because I'm absolutely qualified, and I know that I can make a difference. And I know that the sheriff's office right now needs someone that can lead them and bring them into a different direction that they're going.
Okay, thanks, Bill. We let you go. All the best. Bye. As we get,
best of luck, my friend.
Thank you, Bill. As we have the last few minutes here, let me, Wills, if you want to say a few words, and then we'll go to you, Mark, to round us out. But we have about 3 minutes left. So
yeah, absolutely. Thank you again for having me as well. I think one of the big themes that sticks out to me in having this conversation and listening to all three of you, including John, is really this issue around good governance, and we're talking about it and keeping the governor in check. It's important in the State House where that check and balance is built in with the vetoes, but it also matters in how the legislative process is run, and making sure that equity and DEI is part of that conversation that isn't just what legislation is being brought up, but how it's being brought up and what those processes look like. And that's the same conversation we're having in Manchester as well. How our school boards run, how the Board of Aldermen is run, and really understanding how government works is very important. And that would be my only ask for voters, is not only for my vote, but voting and considering candidates that have a commitment to good governance, of showing up when they're needed, not just when it's convenient or easy.
And of representing everybody, right?
Absolutely.
And understanding that. Thank you, Wilson. We wish you all the best. And Mark, if you'd want to say a few words.
I'd echo the same words. I think New Hampshire, you have lots of ways that you can get involved. In the legislature, the executive council, the local, and I think you see some examples of this right now. And for those people who've never stepped up and never done this, it can be very rewarding work. You can make a difference as you have. You can make a difference, and you can restore respect and integrity in local and state government, and make sure that it is the people's work, and that the people understand that those that are serving are there for the right reasons, and they're there because they understand how important the needs of people in their communities are. So, best of luck to you guys. This has been great. Great to be here with you, and we'll see what happens in a few days here.
Yes, we're down to a week. I think the voting thing is important too. People should know that absentee voting, you can do this. You can go to City Hall today. If you still have time today, I think you can. You can go to City Hall and you can vote there today. You don't have to wait until the 8th to do that. And it's very important. The turnout for these things is terrible, generally. And I know everybody's busy with their lives and doing other things, but my parting words would be, if you're frustrated or you believe strongly in things, or go out and vote, and your vote does really make a difference, and especially in something like a primary where the numbers are low, it's really important. So I'd like to thank both of you for being here on behalf of John Hopwood, and thank John for allowing us to be here and on his program. I'd like to thank Brendan, our technician in the background, who makes us all look good despite how hard that is. I wish everybody a great week, and thank you all.
Yeah, great.